Hey Siri, read notifications.
You have notifications from Messenger and YouTube. You have 9 notifications from Messenger.
Please don't.
Darren's baby, no, you find you want sex or no?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, why would you stick that on there and do that?
Darren's baby, don't
Better than that. You know it's gonna talk.
Darren's baby, I like it. Darren's baby, yes.
You know it's gonna say
Darren's
something.
baby, oddity.
I'm trying to get it.
Darren's baby, with me.
You should have played with it in the first place, you know.
Darren's baby, are you happy we had sex?
Yeah.
Shall I read them all?
Yes. Yes.
And you have 1 notification from YouTube. Red circle. Watch Live Now. Nicole Brown. Hi. That's all.
I just wanted to get rid of that.
Yeah, I see. You wanted to play it.
Red circle.
Come on, seriously.
That.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, sorry.
What? Sorry about what now?
You trying to get the right link?
Trying to freaking do it and it won't let me. I'll boil eggs and eggs on a bagel. That's what I'm having for dinner because we have nothing else. Well, we do, but that's what
Did you edit?
Yes, I already edited it.
Yeah.
Can you see? Just let me load in with that.
Our abbreviated countdown of Toonami Pre-Flight. Welcome to another Toonami Pre-Flight.
It's okay. It's more for us to just talk.
Just gotta
Yeah,
stretch it out.
fill the time.
Spanning time. Today we're sort of doing another alternate universe reality.
Yeah.
The 50s.
Yep.
Awful time.
For some people, yeah.
Yeah. We're going to talk Jinro number 43-ish on Pace Magazine.
We're in the top 50, though, firmly in the top 50.
We are.
Yeah.
At least slightly.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going back. We have skipped around a little bit, but
Yeah.
I don't think there's any retreating into the the back 50.
Gotcha.
I think we're only pressing forward. And then we're going to talk about some of our and your favorite 50s movies, because every now and then we try to tie everything together.
Thematically.
Usually we fail, but we always
Speak for
sometimes
yourself.
try.
I don't fail.
Well, no, in terms of the movie and the question. Sometimes it's not tongue and groove.
It's pretty close, usually.
Tell yourself that.
Well, I'm the one who usually comes up with the fucking questions, so
If you
you could just come up with more of your own.
Sorry for the swearing. I can't control what they do.
No, you're worried about it now.
You're fine, Darren.
take it away,
Together.
take the.
Cool. Okay.
Show us
So
what's
we're
up.
going to talk about Jinro.
We haven't
which-
gotten through the whole rundown yet.
Who gives a shit? They know by now. It's going to be a bunch of stuff. And then, but first we're going to talk Jinro and 50s movies. Can we proceed? So, Jinro came out in 1999. It was a theatrical release. And I didn't know this until we did research, but there are 2 previous Jinro movies in this series of stories.
The Karos Panzercorps
Yeah.
mega series.
Which were live action films, neither of which did very well. So Mamoru Oshii, who wrote these stories, basically directed the first 2 films, and they wouldn't let him direct the third one because the first 2 were flops. So he decided to make it as an animation, and he had a sort of acolyte direct it, which is really weird.
Yeah.
Chain of events. I didn't know that when I saw the movie. It came out and got a pretty good theatrical push, as I recall, because I remember at least seeing it show up in theaters. I don't think I saw it in the theater.
I didn't see it in the theaters.
I remember seeing posters for it and stuff, so I think it got a broad release after a while. It's a really sort of challenging anime because it's super depressing.
Pause.
It's depressing, it's super gory, and it's very, very
Go back a little bit.
Ah, boy.
Stupid Skype.
Go back that and then don't complain.
There are 2 previous Shinro movies in this series of stories.
The Karos Panzercorps
Yeah.
mega series.
Which were live action films, neither of which did very well. So Mamoru Oshii, who wrote these stories, basically directed the first 2 films, and they wouldn't let him direct the third one because the first 2 were flops. So he decided to make it as an animation, and he had a sort of acolyte direct it, which is really weird.
Yeah.
Chain of events. I didn't know that when I saw the movie. It came out and got a pretty good theatrical push, as I recall, because I remember at least seeing it show up in theaters. I don't think I saw it in the theater.
I didn't see it in the theaters.
I remember seeing posters for it and stuff, so I think it got a broad release after a while. It's a really sort of challenging anime because it's super depressing.
It's a bummer.
It's super slow, it's super depressing, it's super gory, and it's very, very sad. So basically, the story is about an alternate history when Germany has won the World War II and has occupied Japan, basically. So these are essentially Homeland Security soldiers. This movie's about a Homeland Security soldier who's working for the Japanese government as an anti-terrorist sort of person. Shock troop, if you will.
Yeah.
And he's super sad and kind of shut down because he's doing this horrible, dehumanizing job. And the flashpoint of the movie is at the beginning where he's ordered to kill a young girl who's been identified as a terrorist, and he can't bring himself to do it. And then she uses an improvised explosive device and blows herself up in a suicide bombing.
And it only gets happier from there.
Yeah, and that's the that's the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it
That's
just gets
probably
darker from there.
Yeah.
And then so he visits the gravesite of this girl because he can't get her out of his head. And he feels like I think it's the first time he's sort of forced to really confront that he might have a limit to what he's willing to do.
And it's a disgrace for him. Like he
gets in trouble for it. He gets censured. He gets in a lot of trouble for not doing it because, the government's position is you allowed her to set off this bomb by hesitating.
Yeah, she didn't end up killing anybody other than herself, but they're like, you got off lucky.
Yeah. So he visits her grave because he can't get her out of his head, and he meets a girl who says she's her sister. And so he starts to form a relationship with her, and slowly, as the movie goes on, you discover that the sister is a honeypot, who's she's someone who was also a bomber and got turned by the government and is working for another branch of the government that's trying to investigate his branch, where it gets pointlessly convoluted in the way that many Oshii stories.
What is this name? What is the name of this movie?
So then she is trying to lead him into a trap because she's being forced, but then you find out.
Can you say the name of the movie?
The Wolf Badger.
General the Wolf
Badger.
General the Wolf Badger. Okay. I'm gonna look up the animation when I get a chance to do it. Because it looks like a good movie. I hope it's dubbed so I can watch it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, keep going.
That his unit has a special unit inside it that knows about this other government agency and is running a counter op against them. So
it's like
total
a triple
confusing.
agent.
Fake. It's like double cross.
That's the Wolf Brigade. Is the Dream Within a Dream unit.
So
is it Brigade or Wolf Badger?
All these guys, and the big turning point in the movie is he's asked to kill this girl.
Wolf Brigade.
Killing this young girl.
Yeah, she's the loose end to be tied up.
And spoiler alert, the movie ends with him killing her and him just sort of being depressed and sad about it. And he's completely surrendered what little humanity he had left. So it's a upbeat tale.
She's reciting the Little Red Riding
Oh, Little
Hood.
Red Riding Hood, yeah, the big bad wolf.
And in the middle of it, it's you hear the gunshot, and you see one of the other guys is like putting his gun back in because he was like, "This guy's not going to do it. I'll take care of it." And then one guy finishes like, "And the wolf ate."
Yeah,
Right.
and then you
It's
find
like
out it was
fade
him killing her. So a super fun movie. It looks gorgeous. It's a really beautifully made movie. The violence is crazy gory. It's like, in terms of just gun violence, it's one of the more gory anime I've seen. But it's really well done. The designs are impeccable. The dub is great. I mean, it's production IG working at a high level, so it's worth watching.
Yeah, and it's Hiroyuki Okiura later did Letter to Momo.
Yeah, which is also great. We've also talked about here.
Indeed.
So let's look at the trailer for Jinro, the Wolf Brigade.
Once upon a time, there was a girl who hadn't seen her mother in 7 years. In the woods, on her way to her mother, she met a wolf. The wolf asked her whether she'd be taking the path of pins or the path of needles. When the girl said that she was going to take the path of pins, the wolf hurried off down the path of needles and ate up the little girl's mother.
So, what happened to the girl who took the path of pins to go home? Tales of beasts getting involved with humans always end on a bad note.
How about we take off someplace far away?
We are not men disguised as mere dogs. We are wolves disguised as men.
Wolves, not men.
A tale of a girl who dreamed of a love with a man destined to live as a beast.
Mother, what big claws you have! Mother, what big teeth you have!
Jinro, the Wolf Brigade.
They do a good job of making it feel exactly the bummer that it is.
So as fun as it looks, it's even more fun to watch. But I would say it's a great movie, but it's one that you're probably not going to watch more than once or twice.
Yeah.
It's
Not Grave of the Fireflies.
yeah,
Seal up the disc and bury it in the backyard.
but it's
it's
up
close.
there. But worth checking out, and a kind of a fascinating alternate history tale of what might have been in Japan. I think anime in particular does a really good job of grappling with Japan's complicated history, especially World War II, and certainly post atom bomb. A lot of anime sort of delves into things that happened to the Japanese culture as a result of those two catastrophic events. So we
With Blade Runner being the third.
So we decided to build off of that and talk about some of our favorite movies from the 1950s, which is when Jinro was set. So the question of the week was, what's your favorite 50s movie? And I have to say, I'll just confess that I'm not super into movies from pre-1950. Like, I know there, as a person who went to an art school, I know of all the classic films from the 20s, 30s, and 40s and 50s, but it's like, as a leisure watcher, there's not very many films from before 1960 really that I want to sit down and watch. So I don't have as broad of a knowledge of 50s film as I do from the 60s forward, because it's just, some of it just feels, it's so from another era that I can't get through to.
Yeah, I mean, the studio system 50s, post-World War II America, where the best is.
Yeah. So the 60s to me is when film really started to get interesting as auteurs kind of rose, and the French New Wave, and which was the 50s too. But really, that's where to me it started getting more exciting. So, but That said, I do think there are some 50s films that do feel ahead of their time, and still you can watch now and don't feel dated really beyond, superficial stuff. So one of the first ones I'll talk about is Orson Welles' classic Touch of Evil, which is from, I believe, 1959. And the story of Touch of Evil is interesting because there's two stories as to how it got made. One was Charlton Heston, who is the star of the film, along with Orson Welles, who directed. Charlton Heston was attached to the script, and they didn't have a director, and he evidently said, well, who else is in it? And he saw that Orson Welles was cast as sort of the villain, and he said, well, I'd be really interested if Orson Welles was also directing. So the movie studio offered him the chance to direct, and he had been working in Europe doing stuff like Othello and sort of low-budget European Shakespearean stuff, and Welles was evidently really ready to try to mount a comeback, which is why he took the job in the first place of acting, because he didn't like acting. He preferred directing, but he was known also as an actor, and he took the job. The other origin story is that Welles was in a meeting with a movie producer who they were having a conversation, and as a bet, Welles said, give me the worst piece of shit script you can, and I will still make it into a good movie, because a good director is the most important thing. I kind of believe the first story more, but no one knows which of the two is true, but those are the two origin stories of this film. So Touch of Evil takes place in the 50s in a town that's basically Tijuana. They don't say it, but that's basically it. It's on the Mexican border, and the movie starts with a car bomb exploding, and Charlton Heston is a Mexican DA. So Charlton Heston is playing a Mexican. So again, this is the days of whitewashing. He's playing a Mexican DA who is worried about the implications for Mexico because it was a Mexican citizen who set off the bomb.
Yeah.
And Orson Welles plays the crooked town sheriff, who's sort of a ruined alcoholic shell of a man, who's an abject racist who wants nothing more than to just find some Mexican to blame this thing on. And he ends up clashing with Charlton Heston and attempting to have him killed and have his wife kidnapped. Janet Leigh plays his wife, Janet Leigh of Psycho, of course. But it's shot amazingly. It looks gorgeous. Evidently, Welles did it in a way that was very uncommon for the time, which was the height of this, really the beginning of the decline of the studio era, to be honest. But this was sort of one of the last film noir that popped. And one of the reasons is because a couple weeks before the shooting, Welles held rehearsals with the whole cast, which no one ever did. He also invited the cast to come up with their own dialogue if they differed with the dialogue. So, he really had the unit of people working together, which is not an uncommon approach these days to a lower budget film anyway. But definitely then it was considered very unusual. Janet Leigh talked about how exciting it felt to go to set every day and know that she was an active part of creating this thing instead of just being like the studio's tool. So as a result, it's a great movie. It's amazingly well shot, and it was taken away from Welles, of course, and re-edited and somewhat reshot by the studio, so it didn't end up being the big comeback he wanted. It flopped when it came out, and then in the 70s, when the auteur theory was really at its height, they did a recut that released the longer version. And in the 90s, the famous editor Walter Murch found Welles' notes, and he put together what is now considered the definitive cut that follows exactly how Welles wanted the movie cut.
Shockingly enough, is a much better movie.
Shockingly better.
Turns out Orson Welles doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
So I've talked about Touch of Evil before, so rather than show the same clip I showed before, I instead have a clip of Orson Welles, when he lived in Europe, was on several different TV shows, because again, he was an actor of note and a radio personality and a playwright, and he did everything. So he was on this radio show where they asked him about the rise of quote-unquote horror films and comics, because this was the 50s at the height of the scare where EC Comics and all those horror comics were the moral majority was all up in arms over the violence and how it was affecting our youth. And I think it's sort of an evergreen question that you hear about. Now it's video games that get painted with that brush, or violent television, but I like Welles' response. He's very thoughtful to these British broadcasters that are just trying to literally stir up shit. I thought it was worth watching, so let's check that out.
certain amount of criticism of the trends of American influence on things like horror comics and indeed on the films. Do you feel that there's anything really, when you get down to it, in the suggestion that American influence is towards spread of juvenile delinquency to the world?
I don't think that horror films or horror comics contribute to juvenile delinquency. I think that they may encourage psychotics and homicidal and other dangerous types. Juvenile delinquency is, I think, a symptom of the illness of our age. It doesn't come from lack of playgrounds or bad comic books, but of a great longing for youth to have something to rebel against.
You wouldn't say that children are imitative and that they tend to imitate what they see or read?
If they were, they would have come from the Bear Pits and the Globe Theatre and committed some rather extraordinary acts in the Elizabethan days, you know.
You don't think of the glorification of violence, which is shown even in some of the westerns, gives them ideas. It would make them think they like to shoot from the hip or...
Well, you see, I think
I
that all vital periods of the drama and of literature are periods of great violence, and that all of our great plays and novels are violent. And I don't like that when they are poor novels or when they are not works of art, they become shoddy and seem to be pandering.
Yes, but
usually wicked, you know.
Virtue triumphs, whereas in the horror comics it doesn't.
Doesn't it?
I don't think so.
No, not really.
Well, it doesn't in Edgar Allan Poe either, you know.
I love how he just is like, well, it doesn't Edgar Allan Poe either, so eat it. So my next is, again, talking about the ability of Japanese media to sort of synthesize the experiences that they went through as a culture. One of the best examples of that is Godzilla, the classic 1954 Gojira, which was a huge hit immediately and came out in the U.S. And a lot of us grew up with the version that was made specifically for the U.S., where they cut the movie down and added a bunch of pointless scenes with Raymond Burr, which was the one I grew up with.
Yeah.
The original is superior, but they're both worth watching. And it's actually it's so 50s, but at the same time, it's such a timeless sort of message, and it's so well made that it really holds up for me. But obviously Godzilla is just a walking metaphor for atomic energy and, Nagasaki and Hiroshima and the events that happened at those two sites. And Godzilla is a direct analog to nuclear power, atomic power at the time. And man's inability to control the things that he releases, which is a theme we're still living out now. So still incredibly relevant, at least on a thematic level. And then on a monster level, this is the first kaiju film, which became Godzilla literally created an entire genre of movies, giant monster movies, most of which, 90% of which, are nowhere near the level of quality that Godzilla is. And Ishiro Honda, who directed this movie, ended up directing a whole bunch of Godzilla movies. As a lifelong Godzilla fan, I've always loved it. So let's check out the OG Godzilla trailer from back in the day.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters, alive, surging up from the depths of the sea on a tidal wave of terror to wreak vengeance on mankind. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, it's alive, a gigantic beast, stalking the earth, crushing all before it in a cyclonic cavalcade of electrifying horror, raging through the streets on a rampage of total destruction. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, incredible titan of terror, wiping out a city of 6 million in a holocaust of flame. Jet planes cannot destroy it. Bombs cannot kill it. All modern weapons fail. Is this the end of our civilization? Can the scientists of the world find a way to stop this creature? For the answer, see Godzilla, King of the Monsters. You may wish to deny it, but your eyes tell you it's true. A tale to stun the mind. More fantastic than any ever written by Jules Verne. More terrifying than any ever shown on the screen. Awesome. Incredible.
Why did you say kiss Melissa me? What? What's that supposed to mean?
Come on.
What?
It keeps auto-correcting.
Oh, audio correcting, huh?
Yeah, sometimes. There.
I want to kiss you.
Unbelievable! A story beyond your wildest dreams. Dynamic violence. Savage action.
Dynamic violence.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Fantastic beyond comprehension. Gripping beyond compare. Astounding beyond belief. The mightiest monster of them all. See Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
There's obviously a cliche now, you know, the Japanese people running from the giant monster, but the reason it's become a cliche is because Godzilla makes such an impact. And even
They threw Jules Verne under the bus.
I know they did. Well, fuck Jules Verne. So even in the movie, the main scientist who comes up with the way to stop Godzilla is so concerned with his invention being used to further war that he ends up sacrificing himself and making sure the invention can never be used again. So, I mean, the whole movie is just one long atomic metaphor. And then finally, something from 1958, and that is, of course, some would say Hitchcock's best film, and that is 1958's Vertigo, starring Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak. A complicated movie about obsession from a director who was obsessed with many of his actresses, who he is known to have sexually harassed and abused in various ways, which makes this movie even creepier on a whole different level because poor Kim Novak was one of the actresses, she's talked about this before, that he just sort of constantly harassed. Vertigo is about a detective played by Jimmy Stewart who is asked to find a woman who looks remarkably like his dead wife. Then he becomes obsessed with her, starts asking her to dress like his wife, and gets caught up in a larger web of intrigue.
Weird.
But it's one of the greatest thrillers ever made. It's one of the earliest examples of the way noir ended up changing to become almost more about the interior thoughts and feelings and emotions of the characters as opposed to more about the environment that they're in. It's more you're inside Jimmy Stewart's character's head in a way that's wasn't that common and was kind of uncomfortable for the time. Of course, the great
Comfortable now.
Of course, the great title sequence is from Saul Bass. It's one of the best looking movies Hitchcock ever shot and consistently considered one of the greatest movies ever made, I think with good reason. And it's complicated and creepy like most 50s movies would be nowadays.
Yeah.
Let's check out, I think I have the trailer, or no, I have a clip, I think, from...
What's that?
I have to eat.
Oh.
Can we finish this on Tuesday?
Mm-hmm.
I mean on... Yeah, Tuesday.
Friday or Tuesday, whatever you want.
Tuesday because I'll have to go in the shower on Monday.
Okay.
So,
We do it.
remember where it's at?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
At that part, yes.
All right.
Love you, baby.
Love you, baby. Get off the stream.